and welcome to Wealth Matters, where we discuss the opportunities and challenges of preserving and managing wealth. This show is presented to you by Gaslowitz Frankel. We are a law firm dedicated to resolving disputes involving your wealth, whether it be through your will, your trust, your business, or your investments. For news, pictures, and tips, go to our website at gaslowitzfrankel.com or follow us on Twitter at Estate Dispute. Our show's hashtag is Wealth Matters. Your hosts today are Craig Frankel and Adam Gaslowitz, and we're talking about family planning dynamics at the end of life.
Now it's time to introduce our guests. We're pleased to have with us today Nick Djuric, a partner at the Atlanta law firm of Sutherland, Asbell & Brennan, specializing in tax and estate planning, and Brandy Wright, a wealth manager at Cambridge Wealth Counsel. Before we start, let me just ask each of you to give our audience a brief description of what you guys do. Nick, why don't you start?
I'm a tax lawyer. Sutherland is a national law firm, but I concentrate in estate planning, planning for high net worth individuals, planning for families, planning for owners of closely held businesses, and then administering estates and trusts that result from that planning.
Brandy?
I am with Cambridge Wealth Counsel, and we do comprehensive financial counseling for our clients, high net worth, be it executives, business owners, retirees.
All right. Greg?
So we're starting off today, and we've been doing a 4-part series talking about how we as professionals can help our families talk about and deal with estate planning so it's smoother and easier for the entire family, including both the planner and, for lack of a better word, the plannees. And we talked about, 2 months ago, we talked about how one starts the planning process as you're beginning your careers. And last month, we talked about as you've now become more established in your careers and you have adult children and are starting to have grandchildren, how we can change our planning and our attitudes. This week, we're talking about as we near the end of life, as our parents or we are aging and our children now are adults and our lives are largely set financially, or at least hopefully they are. How do we address the issues of both estate planning and how do we address the issues of decisions we're going to make as a family for how we're going to treat our families and our children and our parents and our grandparents as they age? So let's just start off, and Nick, I'll start with you. What are some of the things that we as families, both again from the planning perspective and from the family perspective, need to think about or talk about as we start to age?
Well, you started by saying planning as a family, and that is would be a important way to do it, but it's often not done that way. It is often either not planning, but let's assume there is planning going on.
And by the way, not planning is planning.
It is.
There are rules that will happen. We know what will happen if you don't plan.
There is a plan for you, whether you plan for it or not. The other element, though, is planning done just by the planners, and to use your term, not involving the plannees at all. Very often, what mom and dad, or what dad and dad's second wife plan is just a black box that the plannees have no clue what's going to be coming down the road. So just to start with how you've asked, what kind of things should the family be thinking about, maybe the first thing to think about is involving the children in the planning and starting them from an early stage in the discussions. Because setting the expectations early will go a long way to avoid misconceptions and disappointment later on.
I assume that's particularly true if you have family businesses that are involved.
That's right. And very often, you're going to have to address the plannees if there's a family business, because there's going to be simply no way for you to keep that wealth within the family unless there's someone that you've planned for to come behind you to take it over. The business is not going to be run by itself after you're dead.
And I'm going to throw out 2 statistics that I look up these statistics. This is kind of a boring life I have. So 80% of all of our wealth in the United States comes from small businesses and family-owned businesses. And 95% of all businesses will fail in the second generation.
Yeah, from either lack of planning or lack of interest or a lack of any kind of ability in a future generation to take it over. Very often, those that are good at creating wealth don't produce children that are good at maintaining or working with wealth. And that's not something always that parents can control. There's a lot of randomness in how your kids
or
are
even
turn out.
recognize. So Brandy, Nick talked about that you got to, the first step is bring the family in. As somebody who's being a financial planner and advising families, how do you do that?
I think that when you sit down with a family, the worst thing you can do is go in there with a mindset of what they need. You really have to know the family dynamic. You've got to spend some time with the nuances of everybody's personality. And if you know, dad may feel one way, mom may feel a separate way. And if you don't spend time getting to personally know what they want, not together, but even separately, you'll never get a plan to fruition. So I think the family dynamic is really the genesis of getting a good plan even together.
I imagine that with regard to both of your practices, generally when you're meeting with the client, what we typically would call the client, it will be with that one generation, the person doing the planning. And so the rest of the family isn't involved, at least in that initial meeting. Do you do anything, either of you, to either bring them in or to talk to that particular client about involving the rest of the family?
Yes. I mean, you start to ask the parents, friendly questions about their children and what was a holiday like together. Start feeling, getting a sense of how they all communicate together. Then you will know whether or not bringing that second generation in for a conversation and how best to approach that or offer that up as a suggestion. But it really, the getting to know your client is the single biggest step in this whole process to me.
I heard a comedian on the radio yesterday that said that when you go on a first and second and third date, you're not meeting the person you're dating, you're meeting their representative.
Exactly.
And that they really aren't able to be truthful of who they really are. I find that to be true when you start talking about the relationships with your children. If you ask any parent about their child, the majority are going to say they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. So Nick, how do you get through that veneer that may be accurate, it may be inaccurate, but you just don't know?
Well, very often you are clued in to potential disconnects between what the parent thinks their children either are or capable of, and what you suspect might be the case by just things that come out in those planning conversations. And very often you're led to be asking, do your children know this? When the parents have expressed some kind of assumption or what they believe their children probably expect. A client who I had who planned to leave most of her wealth to charity assumed her children would know that. She's been very charitably inclined throughout her lifetime. She assumed they would know that mom was going to leave everything to a series of charities and foundations. Do they know that? Because if they don't know that, it might be time to set a different expectation.
Okay, so let me say on the radio right now, kids, all my money, what little it is going to charity. You're not getting a dime.
Yeah, most people don't expect that of their parents. Most people expect an inheritance. And the problem is they often don't know what the estate looks like.
Absolutely not. That probably one of the biggest source of tensions we have in estate administration is a discovery by the children, or very commonly one of the children, because there'll be one child that was very involved with mom and dad until the end, and then the others were not. Where did it all go? I saw 10 years ago a bank statement that had this amount on it. Where did it all go? There's often perfectly legitimate explanations for where it all went, but there is an immediate conflict, an immediate level of distrust that then that one child who was involved often will have to spend a long time dealing with, whereas the parents could have dealt with that.
Sure, and if it's a
before.
second marriage, there's always an assumption that the second spouse did something with it or her kids did something with it.
Yes.
And those discussions generally don't happen. Even if the kids are, as Craig mentioned earlier, in their 50s and 60s and the parents are in their 70s and 80s and 90s, there's still a general lack of understanding about what's actually involved in the estate and what's actually going to happen to that estate.
Before you get to the money, Brandy, so what I'm hearing is, and I see this, Nick could be the screening lawyer for our office. Everyone thinks their parents have more money, and they don't understand why the controlling child or controlling third spouse spent it. But it seems to me that can't be the first thing you say, that, here's where the money is, and normally where the money went was to take care of the aging parent through the end of life. How do you talk about that, where you're going to, where do we want to spend our money, regardless of how much money we have?
Again, you got to know your client. And I was, speaking to, really, you got to do your homework before you sit down with a client. We live in a day and age where a simple Google search, and I can see their wedding pictures. I can see what kind of lifestyle they live. I can also find out what their children are interested in, what SEC school they like. And just by virtue of doing that kind of homework, I'll be able to tailor my discussions with them in order to find out who is going to be my most problematic child in any kind of discussions on getting estate plans done or trying to get everybody on the same page and happy with how we're going to explain, this money was spent here. How do I tailor this conversation?
Yeah, I assume you both find what I found early in my practice, which is most parents know exactly what their children are like.
No.
You haven't found that?
No. I think that a lot of them will, again, they'll have a veneer that they think, this is, my child does this, this, and this. They've never seen their Facebook page.
And every parent's an enabler.
What do you think, Nick?
I think parents not only don't know what their children's like, I don't think they know what their children's expectations are. I think parents often misjudge what their children will think or react to a certain situation. You mentioned the second spouse situation. Mm-hmm. There are very often children who are perfectly at ease with their parents getting remarried. It's my dad's money. He can do with it what he wants. I want him to be happy. And if he spends it all on her and leaves it to her, that's fine with me. There are other children, there may be a sibling in that same family who does not believe that at all and might have a perfectly amicable, correct relationship with that second spouse, but be resenting the spending all along. And the parent has no clue.
How do you bring that out in a way that is productive so that you can eliminate or limit the amount of friction that you have when one of them dies?
You ask them about the holidays. Who did you spend your holidays with? Who showed up? What did you do for birthdays? What kind of vacations you have? You'll be able to figure out this children who do show up for these events and the ones who are not there as often. Just from those kind of conversations, you can start figuring out who's going to be your problem.
I found you can also, if you ask them how their kids handle money, parents at least know that some of their kids are savers, some of them are spenders, some